pretty tired this morning. I don't know about you guys, whatever you did for New Year, or maybe you had a nice early night. So it was a toss-up, really, whether we looked at virya, or energy, today, or samadhi, concentration, stability of mind. And there were some good reasons for going with energy, especially when you have low energy, and how in a way it can be quite helpful. It's harder to use too much energy when you're already quite tired. Anyway, I decided to leave energy virya for tomorrow because samadhi has a few tie-ups with where we've been going, where we've come from, particularly with right view, and also with with the afflictive emotions, with the kleshas. So I thought we'd move a bit more seamlessly into samadhi. And I just wanted to maybe just reference that balance between energy and concentration, really just by way of a little story, or something that came up for me in a meditation review on a retreat quite early on in my days of Satipatthana practice. No, you don't get a vote, I'm afraid. Good try. So I was on this retreat, and it was run by this Burmese teacher, U Pandita, the human embodiment of wrathful Vajrapani, as I saw him. And he, so I was having a review with one of the other teachers, a German guy, and he just gave me this sort of throwaway comment in the review. He said, too much concentration, not enough energy. That was what my mind was doing. And I was really intrigued. I hadn't really come across that before, that one could have too much concentration. I thought one could never have too much concentration, that, that it was, going to take me towards the jhanas, and so it had to be a good thing. But apparently not. Apparently I didn't have energy and concentration, or samadhi, in balance. And to be honest, it didn't really feel in balance. My main experience of samadhi, concentration, up to that point was something very, very heavy and tight. I often got a lot of tension, which I just put down to my own being, and a lot of migraines, a lot of body tension. But my concentration typically felt quite narrow and constrained in a way, but with quite a bit of power in it. So many years later, with a different Burmese teacher, I came across a book that he had written, which I looked for everywhere this morning, and I couldn't find it because I wanted to show you. On the cover of one of the early editions is a picture of a meditator, and he's sitting there looking like it's putting a lot of there's a lot of concentration, and he's got this big stone in his head. It's enormous. It looks like a sort of little Ayers rock that's just sort of bursting out of his head. And I thought, that's how I feel like when I feel quite concentrated. That's the experience, and it's not overall a pleasant one. It was another learning for me, which is partly, I think it is this relationship between effort, the quality of effort that we use, but the quality of samadhi that we've cultivated, and not getting the balance quite right. So if I can find the book, I will. Don't know where it's gone. So Lama Tillman, or maybe he's just called Tillman these days. So it's a teacher in I think the Kagyu tradition. It's one of one of Asantra's teachers, and he says, don't translate samadhi as concentration. It is deep stability and relaxation in the mind. I'll say that again. Don't translate samadhi as concentration. It is deep stability and relaxation in the mind. So this really gave me a helpful pointer, really, this idea of relaxing into stability, relaxing into steadiness of mind, relaxing into awareness and stability. So I think stability, samadhi, actually some of the qualities I described were not very beautiful. They're quite uncomfortable, the tension, the narrowness, the feeling of constriction. But actually I think this quality of samadhi or stability has many beautiful qualities, many sort of skillful qualities when it's in balance. Qualities of calm, of peacefulness, of steadiness. And at times, as I said, that's when it's sort of, you can have a type of integrated power. When there's a lot of samadhi, the mind can feel very powerful. In the sense that there's a lot of power at the mind's disposal in order to put to seeing things more clearly. So I want to talk about two different methods, two different ways of to calm and steady the mind in a way to cultivate stability or to use that sense of stability. And both of them create the conditions for clearer seeing, create conditions for insight. But they do it. They do it in different ways. They're different methods, and they're both quite traditional. From the tradition. So they both work by, in a way that the principle that conjoins them is that the mind isn't calm because of the hindrances, because of the hindrances and the kleshas that agitate the mind, that cause sort of ripples and disturbances. So if there's an absence of klesha, then and the presence of its opposites, so contentment, generosity, calm, peacefulness, then the mind is naturally stable. So I think within Triratna, the predominant way that Bhante has talked about, it's not he hasn't only talked about this way, but this is predominant way of understanding samadhi is in relation to one-pointedness, is in relation to gradually coming to rest more and more of our attention on a particular object. And typically in the mindfulness of breathing, that would be the breath. So we gradually, as we rest more attention on the breath, then less attention is given to body sensations, to thoughts, until the mind is unified around this object. And when the hindrances disappear through this process of unification, the mind feels lighter, feels happier, feels focused, and can have this sense of power. And then, as most of you will be familiar with, that's a point where we can either progress through the jhanas, if you have a mind that goes there, and not everybody does, develop very powerful concentration, or so or to explore the jhanas, maybe rest in the first jhana, and there are various insight practices that we can do. And the ability, the power that the mind has through that unification is what allows it to penetrate into reality. It has enough stability, enough power to penetrate. At some point, when they, in a way, when the conditions fruit, if you like, when our sort of karmic conditions come together, vipaka. So that probably feels quite familiar to most, if not all of you. That's our sort of framework. And then the second method, which I'll probably spend a bit more time on because I think it would probably be less familiar. So the second method to calm and steady the mind and work with the kleshas, work with the hindrances, is using the power of right view. Right perspective, helpful Dharma perspective on experience. The mind calms down because it's viewing things in a helpful way. You could even say that it's thinking about things in the right way. But thinking is just a small part of it. It's thinking, the type of thinking that supports awareness and wisdom to do their jobs. And it's also thinking and seeing experiences less personally, more impersonally. So this isn't a perfect fit, this example, but just remember a time perhaps when you felt very agitated, perhaps very emotional, the mind upset or cross, and someone says just the right thing for you to hear at the time. Maybe they apologize if it's them you've been upset with, or they sympathize, or they say, well, yeah, okay, that's right, I see what you mean. They empathize in some way. And the emotional sort of wind just drops from storm level to perhaps a gentle breeze. So the mind calms down. And it can happen very quickly. It's like the wind just drops from that sail of whipped up agitation in the mind. So right view, if you like, uses that flexibility and malleability of the mind, and the fact that it can change very fast. And in the example I've given, it changes through someone else's words or thought influencing our mind. But with right view, it's your own thinking, your own sort of framing of experience, your own perspective, which helps the mind calm down and take what's happening less personally. I think often when there's agitation in the mind, there's all sorts of thoughts that go unnoticed about how this is all happening to me. We're right at the center of our storm, but it's not the calm at the center of the storm, unfortunately. Yeah, so there's I'm right, or I'm so upset, or yeah, and these type of thoughts further fuel agitation in the mind. But right thought and right view calm the mind. And they calm the mind so that the defilements, the afflictive emotions, don't need to completely go away. They just need to be able to be seen from a different perspective, seen from the perspective of awareness and right view. So seen more objectively. This is a thought arising in the mind. This is a feeling happening. These are body sensations. It's likely that there will be quite a drop in the agitation in the mind, just because the things are being seen differently. But they don't have to go away. It's possible to be aware of something, and that the nature of the mind that's aware feels different and is able to observe quite big storms in the mind. So in the Satipatthana Sutta, the line that I think is really important here, it says, we're mindful to the extent necessary for clear mindfulness and continuous knowing. So that's the degree of stability that's needed. It's the ability to be present in a relatively continuous way to know what's happening. So that does need some degree of stability. The mind is not sort of being driven in lots of different places. There's a point of stability. There's a place of stability within the awareness and the perspective on experience. So the type of stability in the first way I was talking about is unified, is one-pointed. It tends to be around a narrow focus. In this second method, right view, if you like, supports an awareness that's quite stable, but the objects, there may be many objects that you're observing within the mind. So there isn't a unification between the awareness and the object. If you like, to the degree there's unification, stability, it's within the awareness. And the objects can change, but the awareness, that's what has the stability. That's what has the sense of being able to not be sort of thrown around by our experience. But the commentaries, so not the direct teachings of the Buddha, but when other teachers like Buddha Gosha and Nagarjuna, when other people have written in a way written about the teachings of the Buddha. So in some of the commentaries, there's talk about something called momentary concentration. So this is what we're looking at with this second. So rather than a strong unification with the object, there's momentary concentration, momentary samadhi, karnika samadhi, it's called. So we build stability onto the awareness that's continually knowing objects. Awareness is present to many different objects, and they all help to build stability in the awareness. So this is where this little phrase that we've been using, any object will do, comes in. Any object is a good object to help grow stability in the mind, in the awareness. And this leads to a different type of feeling in the mind, if you like. The feeling of unification from the first method is quite particular, and I kept using this word powerful. It feels powerful, feels strong. It can feel very, very pleasant as well, very blissful. So this Karnika Samadhi, or momentary concentration, can lead to something that feels more like a global awareness or panoramic awareness. So it's very soft. It feels not unlike our ordinary consciousness, and yet it feels subtly and in a certain way quite magically different, because we're present and we're knowing, we're just knowing all these different things that are happening. So rather than focusing down, it's an opening out of attention, but an ability to be present to that. And it can feel quite light, quite flexible. Yeah, but also pleasant and yeah, with a sense of meaningfulness. So maybe I'll just say a little bit in relation. There's just a question. I might respond to this. Can this momentary awareness only be temporary? In a way, it's something we cultivate moment by moment. So yeah, it's usually temporary. We may have a run of continuity of moments of attention, but there's still yeah, there's still moments, but they in a way they can feel not like moments because they feel joined up, because there's continuity of awareness. I think I'll just carry on for now. I might be able to take in that question a little bit later. Yo, quite possibly has resonances with jazz. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to respond to any more chat questions. Otherwise, I get quite thrown and I don't know where I am. But it might be that we can incorporate them later. So in the one-pointed approach, there's the hindrances go into abeyance, if you like. The concentrated mind, the very stable mind, directed and unified, means that the hindrances are not experienced. They go into abeyance while we're meditating. And yeah, they may well come back when we're not meditating, when we don't have the same degree of stability and concentration in the mind. With this broad momentary awareness, the hindrances, I think, and I hope this is probably clear by now, but the hindrances can still be present. They don't need to be gone, if you like, in order to have the degree of stability of mind we're looking for. But we need to keep checking that the hindrances are not in the mind. That's the aware mind, the mind that's knowing or observing, noticing, whichever of these words we use, the mind that's aware of what's happening. So that's why we check the quality of awareness, as I was talking about yesterday, or we can check how we're relating to experience. Awareness is a bit like, in this case, awareness is a bit like there's a lens, how we observe things, how we notice things, and that lens can be colored by the hindrances. It can be colored by the greed or aversion in the mind, or delusion in the mind. In fact, it usually is. But with awareness, if you like, we're looking to recognize those different colorings in the mind and make them into objects. And that process purifies the aware mind. It purifies the lens, in a way, by removing those colorings. And awareness itself is translucent, you could say. We're able to sort of just look and see things more clearly as they are. So I think it has quite deep implications for us working with the hindrances, with the poisons, and coming to be able to bear with quite deep experiences, quite strong experiences of suffering, of dukkha, of reactivity in the mind, without needing to either suppress them, try and make them go away, or without falling into them and becoming overwhelmed by them. So awareness is the practice of using those experiences when they arise to help build, help resource awareness, so that it's able to meet and recognize those experiences for what they are, so that it's strong enough to do that. So I want to tell you the short version of a little story that I quite often tell on retreats, just to give you some some idea of how this might work in practice. In a way to demonstrate, as Vajradevi mentioned this lovely phrase last night, so the kleshas don't have purchase on the aware mind, the mind that's aware. They don't sort of stick, if you like. We can just know them for what they are. Okay, so the short version of this story, which is still probably not that short, but it's to do with being in Burma, the second time I think I was in Burma, and with a good friend I'd met the first time, and we fell out. We fell out, and I think both of us had been quite strongly triggered into one of those things that you don't really know why you're so angry and upset with each other. But there we were. We tried to talk about it, and it hadn't really worked. We then had to spend 12 hours sitting next to each other on an overnight bus journey, not talking to each other, trying not to touch each other. It was that sort of, oh! So we both got back to where we were staying. We were staying at this meditation center outside of Yangon, U Tejania's place. And I was quite conflicted, really. I had two main sort of scenarios in my mind. One was that I was leaving Burma in about a week, and I thought, my aversion was so strong, I thought I could just avoid her during that time. There are 200 people in this retreat center. I could just avoid her for a week. That would be a relief. I knew that wasn't really on, but it was definitely, it was the mind, I suppose, wanting to avoid, wanting to the opposite, wanting to suppress, I suppose. And then there was the other version, which was, I call my sort of good Buddhist version. I don't know how fair that is, but it said, right, you really should go and you should talk to her and you should sort this out. You should go and try again. And so much of my being just did not want to. I could feel it in my body. It would just be overriding something in a way that I knew I could do, but it would be with gritted teeth. And I just thought, well, you've been doing this practice for, 4 or 5 weeks on this particular trip. When push comes to shove, are you going to do it? It's all very well on the meditation cushion or around the monastery, but are you actually going to practice it when it feels really horrible? It feels really difficult. And so I decided that I would. And so I just set the mind to observing, being aware of what was happening. And because I've been on retreat for a while, there was a certain amount of stability of mind. There was a certain amount of positivity and awareness. And quite quickly in the process, I think that the judgments around I shouldn't be feeling this, or I should sort it out, or I'm bad because I want to run away from her, and all these sorts of things, the judgments just dropped, and I just got curious about what was happening. And I just stayed with, I sat mostly in my room rather than go to the shrine room. I sat with just watching the mind and feeling these strong feelings in the body. As a sense of injustice and self-righteousness was quite strong. And there were various thoughts and stories around that. Particular thoughts I started to notice were like throwing fuel onto a fire. It would just sort of just burst up this flaming feelings in the mind and the body. And that happened over and over again as I got sort of a bit caught in a story, or even just a thought, or sometimes just an image of part of our interaction. So, and I just watched it. I just watched it and knew with right view things. So knowing aversion as aversion was the main way that right view was manifesting, rather than it being me being enmeshed in that feeling of aversion. And sometimes sometimes I'd fall into it. Sometimes I'd say, oh, this is enough. I don't want to be feeling this anymore. But largely I just stayed with it and noticed this is aversion. This is what it feels like. This is self-righteousness. This is what it feels like. This is the type of thoughts that it has. Over time, especially the flames, the fuel and the flames felt more and more like energy. I think Stirabandhu mentioned this a couple of days ago, the energy of strong emotions. And that felt, in a way, seeing them a bit more from an experiential perspective. This is the feeling in the mind, feeling in the body. And then the story detached itself to some extent. But what I found really interesting after about a day and a bit, I think it was a day and a half, I sat in my room just going for meals and showers and things. I got very fascinated in watching the process. And what I noticed was a different type of thought started to come, a different quality of thought. And it was not through me trying to think something through me trying to do anything, actually, except observe what was happening. But the type of thought when something like, oh, when she said that, which previously had produced a massive bonfire in the mind, maybe she meant that. And it was like through just sitting with it, through just allowing things to play themselves out, awareness and wisdom were starting to get a bit more purchase, and they were starting to make sense of things in a way that my reactive, inflamed mind could not do. It could only do it by force, by trying to do something or refusing to engage and trying to get away. But when was just able to be with it, certain understandings came about the situation. I didn't know if I was completely right or not, because I hadn't yet talked to her. We'd both agreed that we would have a bit of time apart. And but yeah, that I thought, oh, those types of thoughts really calmed the mind down. And then the other thing that calmed the mind down was some sort of understanding of the nature of aversion. The nature of aversion is fiery. It flares up. It's destructive. It wants to knock things down. And just seeing that in a more impersonal way over and over and over again. God, I can't tell you how many times. And actually, after about a day and a half, I was able to knock on her door, leave her a note, and we talked, and it was fine. And it felt that we were both talking from a place of just having really worked with our own experience. At the time, I still didn't completely understand why I'd been triggered or what that was about. But I understood enough of the mental and physical processes for the mind to come to a point of calm. And that was through the observing mind, through the aware mind being stable enough to use those objects, to use the aversion, to use the disgruntlement as objects of attention. So it's this sort of relationship to our dukkha, to our reactivity, and also to our craving, which I might touch on another time. This sort of relation becomes possible when awareness and right view and stability are present in the mind, and when we're prioritizing their growth, but we're not suppressing or indulging in the more sort of reactive side of the mind. So that wasn't a very short version, but that's the version you've got today. So I guess yeah, I've seen in my experience how awareness and Dharma perspective, awareness and wisdom, to the extent that it's working in the mind in those moments, that they will influence these afflictive emotions. They'll influence the degree of suffering. And awareness and wisdom are always, if you like, are always looking for how, in a way, how to grow, if you like, how to strengthen themselves. And that naturally leads to a calming effect on the mind. If awareness and wisdom are working in the mind, eventually it leads to a lessening of suffering. Okay, I think that's all I've got to say for now. Are there any comments or questions? Satyanandi.
Okay. So that was very inspiring hearing that story. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, I can relate to that process. And I wanted to raise something which I don't think it is necessarily different, but it feels a bit different. So these days, a lot of the most disturbing emotions and kleshas I have a body memory to do with traumatic experiences from very, very early on, and almost always I don't know what they're about. I don't they can be eruptions of very strong energy, and there will have been causes. It's as if you had that difficulty with your friend, but you'd forgotten all about what had happened or something. I don't know. But anyway, I just want, it may be too big a subject to touch on here, but I wondered if you had any words about how to work with those sorts of often very conflicting emotions.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, I didn't really understand for me what had been triggered, but to a degree, I could so I could work with it to quite an extent, and in a way, just have to settle that awareness can only know as much as it knows. Wisdom can only know as much as it knows. It doesn't have to. It's in a way, it for me in that situation, I just thought, well, maybe at some point in the future, there'll be more understanding, more sort of self-understanding. But I think sometimes, and I think there has been actually, but I don't know that there always is. And also I think that sometimes, particularly for trauma memories, I think we need a slightly different framing or a slightly different context. It can just work in addition to awareness. It can, I've certainly found it very, very helpful to, some of the framing from either psychotherapy or from somatic experiencing, just be really helpful in helping to, it gives a certain frame, it gives a helpful framework and maybe an additional framework, but without necessarily having to, it's still not so it's not necessarily about remembering. I don't think it is necessary always to remember. I don't think it's possible to remember, but it is possible to learn with different types of help to stay with and to have some perspective on the dukkha arising in the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're right, it's a big topic. It's a really
Thanks.
Stirabandhu?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Less angry Stirabandhu today. You were talking about the tensions, and you mentioned the word migraine, and my ears pricked up. The more I've explored this approach over the past few years, I'm finding it almost impossible to sit as I am sitting now, like upright. Various parts of my body get really tight, and I've been experiencing a lot of migraine.
Okay.
I've suffered with migraine on and off since childhood.
Yeah.
It's something that runs in the family, but I've been quite puzzled why in recent years it's kind of come back on quite debilitating, quite severe. And I've been sort of like, oh, it's my diet, it's this, it's that, and the other. But then when you mentioned it just now, it's like, oh, maybe I'm trying too hard, maybe I'm pushing myself too hard, maybe I'm expecting too much in the practice. So it's just, I just kind of wanted to respond to that. I don't have a specific question, but I'd be interested in any comments you might have about those kind of tensions in the body, because it's something that it's just out of my conscious awareness that I'm missing. That's kind of feels like sometimes it's like I need to let go of something, or I need to not do something, but I can't quite see it.
I think I'll echo what I said to Satyanandi, really, is that I think I said it to Satyanandi, we can only know as much as we know. Awareness can only know as much as it knows. And in a way, trying for more, that's when the sort of selfing type energy, our sort of personal effort sort of comes in and tries to, and our conceptualizing energy comes out and tries to work it out. and while I think concepts can be very helpful, I think particularly with something like migraine, where we're already sort of wound quite tight, to try and work it out, my experience has been not so helpful. It's more the settling back and what can be known, in my experience right now, and not trying to get any more than that. Yeah, being prepared to work with what's actually there. Don't know. I've had migraines since I was a kid, and yeah, they've got worse, not better through my practice. And but conditionality is incredibly complex, isn't it? And I think the Buddha said we can never understand all of the conditions in play. So we sort of work with what we've got, and if there's an intuition that something might help, might sort of help, not get rid of them, but sort of in a way expand our understanding or our ability to relax around or accept what's happening, then great.
What's just occurred to me is there was a French order member, I think she might have resigned. She started the Parasanga Vajra something.
Vajradevi.
Vajradevi, yeah. I was practicing with her once in Paris, and she said I was really ill, and she just turned to me and said, it was before I was ordained. She said, "Colm, you need to surrender to the illness." And I was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm really trying to fight off the illness by sitting and meditating and chanting."
Yeah,
I've just remembered that now.
Yeah.
Just surrender to the physical pain and then see what emerges, rather than trying to, I just need to move this way, and then if I sit this way, I'm making myself more tight. Anyway, that's enough for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, but that also, I'm just reminded of the practice that Mokshika did with us, the and practice, Andrea Fellows. There's never just pain going on.
Yeah.
I know that Vidyamala works very strongly in this way, and body sensation and sounds, and sounds can be very, very helpful actually, because they're naturally a bit more expansive. You can contract around, certainly I know with migraine I can contract around my head, but yeah, sounds can be bring in some spaciousness and pleasure.
What, you mean play some rock and roll? I'm just kidding.
Experiment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Angela.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Just a quick observation and then a wee quick question. So yeah, I was noticing that I was imagining there could be a danger in objectifying experience, talking in things in terms of objects, mental objects, even though I've known the term and, done the Know Your Mind module and stuff like that. Sort of in terms of reification, like, I've just got that sense in the word object of this solidity, but in fact, the process does seem to aid with a deeper understanding of flow and non-fixedness, actually. So that's an interesting koan, I think.
Yeah.
But my question would be just, is there something you could say just quickly, maybe a tip or something for working with both one-pointedness and broader mindfulness? Yeah.
So are you talking about working with them within the same practice?
No, just more across a Dharma life.
Okay. I think for some minds find it easier than others to do both, but I think to some extent it's helpful. And I guess where this practice fits in within our context is often in the territory of just sitting and spiritual receptivity. So I think Subhuti's talked about how if we just do practice where we're one-pointed practice, or practice where we're making quite direct, quite strong effort. He's very strong about it, actually. He says I mean, as Subhuti often is, he says we can grow to hate practice, which is a strong thing to say, if it's not sort of balanced by times in practice where there's a complete relaxation into what's happening, a relaxation of effort or energy used. And I'll talk more about that tomorrow. And I think he was very keen for us to re-emphasize just sitting. So if you like, this is just sitting, but with quite a lot more sort of pointers in it, with the Satipatthana map of the mind. So I think in that way, you can use it to support times when you're more active in your practice, mindfulness and metta practices. There's lots I could say, but maybe I'll just leave it at that for now. Yeah. Any last one?
There's Matthew and Manisha. And there's also the question from Susie in the chat.
Okay, maybe I'll just... So Manisha.
I think this relates to Angela's question. It just suddenly reminded me that in the early days of my learning to meditate, we were always being told about breadth and focus.
Yeah.
I just wonder if you could comment on that. But that was within the context of learning mindfulness of breathing as a one-pointed practice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. My mind is going different places, but I guess with just sitting, as Bhante taught it, you just sit. So there is a sort of that letting go into it. Where my mind was going in relation to this practice is, again, that balance of receptivity, but not letting go of initiative. So there's the receptivity, but there's also sort of activity, which will be, in a way, that's happening within the breath. There's a noticing of a particular thing that's happening, or a particular quality of mind. So you've got both, if you like. You've got within the breath, you've got moments of focus. I don't know if it's that type of thing you're after. Okay. I think let's leave it for now, because we've been I'll try and see if I can incorporate other questions into what I say, but let's just have a break until 20 to 12. You get 13 minutes this morning, and then we'll sit. I'll have a look at the questions, see what we can include. Okay, here we are again. So we're going to sit, but I just want to, sorry, we're going to sit, but there's just a couple of things in the chat that I wanted to address before we sit. So there's a question: does awareness have a feeling tone, and could that feeling tone be compassion? And then there was a response to that for somebody that they experience equanimity. The awareness has a feeling tone around equanimity. So I'd really encourage you to check out the quality of awareness and what that is, in a way. If you look at some of the aspects of mindfulness that we've looked into, that quality of naturalness, relaxation, not interfering, acceptance, and allowing whatever is there to happen. In a way, if some of those things are there, what does the awareness feel like? And I've been using words like impartial and unbiased, but I also resonate with the equanimity. That sort of balance of mind. It's not siding with experiences, for or against them. And in this area, there was also a question about metta. What part does metta play? And okay, so just from what I've said, I hope that you can relate to some of those qualities, the ease and acceptance and allowing, especially that aspect of allowing whatever is arising to be there, a lack of sort of rejecting certain sorts of experiences or trying to pull in other sorts of experience. It's a metaphor perspective. It's perhaps more implicit, but I think metta is something that we can look for in the observing mind. Is there a quality of metta? However that is manifesting, is that manifesting through the mind that's patient, the mind that's curious, or the mind that's willing? So metta is not one thing. So it may be manifesting in different ways. So it's not that we necessarily need to cultivate metta within the awareness, but I think it can be very helpful to check to see to what extent that attitude is present, the attitude that may manifest in many of the ways that we can, or the facets of metta. And it might be occasionally that it's helpful to, if you like, if you can feel like, oh, perhaps there's a bit of a critical edge or a judging edge or a cool edge in the mind, then you might think, okay, so perhaps in this practice, what would be helpful is maybe to just encourage more explicitly those warm qualities. The curiosity, the willingness to be there, the appreciation in the mind. So metta definitely has its place. So the whole range of positive emotion and qualities of the beautiful mind. Sometimes, I know this is what I was going to say, the last thing was sometimes how to put this? Sometimes it feels like love and awareness are not different. So sometimes I'll just be aware of love in the mind. I'll just be aware of that feeling tone in the mind, and in a very consistent way. So we can play around with these things. But I suppose what I'm just wanting to not think or not give the impression that you have to actively cultivate metta as this one thing, but actually there are many different strands, the ways that metta can already be present in our experience, and we can just by noticing those things that are already there, we can gently encourage them. Okay, so So I'll say a little bit in the practice, but not that much. But I will start and end with a reading. I'll start with a reading from Utejaniya and end with a part of a poem by Adrienne Rich. In clear seeing practice, you must remember that there are always the knowing and the known minds. So the known minds, the rest of the mind, don't have to be calm. They don't have to be peaceful. They could be angry, raging, have all that going on. All that needs to be steady is the knowing. That's the only steadiness that you need, the steadiness of the watching mind. The rest of the minds can do what they want. What Samadhi does is calm down all the rest of the minds. Samadhi calms down everything else that the mind is experiencing, all the happening minds. But to calm the watching, knowing mind, only right view is necessary. Right view stabilizes the mind, stabilizes awareness. As long as you're able to watch, it's okay. It's enough to be able to observe the storm. As coming to yourself quite naturally. Notice where the attention lands and let awareness accompany it. We simply need to be quiet enough, still enough, so that we can notice where the attention goes and let awareness go with it. Through the different fields of awareness. Body sensations, or the breath within the body, moving, expanding, relaxing. Sounds around, sounds within. sound of silence. Noticing mental objects or happenings, arisings. Thoughts in the mind, images, and feelings. Tuning in with the quality of awareness, the feel of awareness. Tuning in lightly, without agenda. Perhaps with some degree of curiosity. What is the flavor of the awareness in this moment? And not asking the question to obtain an answer. But simply out of curiosity, part of the exploration of the mind. Notice how you ask the questions, how you look into the mind. Getting some sense of how you're relating to your experience of objects and your experience of awareness. And seeing if that relationship is tinged with some degree of appreciation, patience, playfulness. Or perhaps noticing areas or moments where there's more contraction or tightness, some sense of an agenda. Things should be different. And seeing if it's possible to notice these things, some degree of spaciousness and acceptance in the awareness. The job of awareness is to notice both the presence and the absence of certain qualities. So if you notice moments of wanting or sense desire, moments of aversion, frustration, confusion, really also noticing moments when those things are absent. And qualities of the beautiful mind are present. And remembering that whatever is happening within the objects of experience doesn't need to go away. What we're looking to do is to cultivate an awareness that can include everything. And of itself has the qualities of the beautiful mind. with the qualities of, from the beautiful mind quality of faith, saddha. Noticing any moments of responsiveness to the Buddha, to our values or ideals, moments of uplift or joy, or moments of confidence, trust in our own practice, our own experience. Noticing any moments where the wisdom faculty appears. And this might be when we remember something we've heard that helps us to practice. That helps us to hold a Dharma perspective on experience. Or when there's a moment of clear seeing, some understanding in the mind, see something in a new way, however small and however momentary. Really relishing these moments. And the faculty of Samadhi, with its steadiness, its stability of mind. Stability of moments of awareness, joining up. And that stability working with the mindfulness, strengthening our ability to be present to whatever is happening in the mind. And with sati, with mindfulness, we help keep the mindfulness online. We help keep the mind awake. Remembering to check, is awareness present? Dropping in the question, what is the mind knowing? And the question just helps us awaken into the present moment, and to be with our experience as it is in the moment. Reconnecting us with attention and where awareness can know what the mind is attending to. whether there's a storm in the mind or a lull. Awareness can know what's happening. Sometimes we can bring awareness to states of mind that's easy to miss. Being aware of the mind that feels dull. Being curious about boredom in the mind. What's that like? Feeling how the quality of wanting can manifest in the body and the mind, and can be felt. So there's less focus on the object of desire and more on the experience of desire itself. The only steadiness that we need is the steadiness of the watching mind, the aware mind. The rest of the minds can do what they want. If the mind were clear, and if the mind were simple, you could take this mind, this particular state, and say, this is how I would live if I could choose. This is what is possible. If the mind were clear, and if the mind were simple, you could take this mind, this particular state, and say, this is how I would live if I could choose. This is what is possible.